and welcome to the informational webinar on selecting performance measurements. This is a follow-up from our Tuesday webinar that we had on March 24th for those of you who either were not able to join us or would like a little bit more time to review the information. Unfortunately, we weren't able to record the webinar, but we still really wanted everyone to have access to this information. So this is actually a post-recorded webinar. And my apologies in advance. I'm a little sick, so my voice is a little raspy, if you can bear with me there. One thing that we did say during the webinar was if you have questions about your specific performance measures at your specific project site, that definitely give us a phone call or an email, and we'll be more than happy to kind of help work through your questions or help you kind of assess your project and what performance measures that you think will be best for your project. With that being said, I just want to go ahead and jump right on in. So those of you who were with us for our supervisor workshop, you know that Autumn Rose from the Corporation for National and Community Service did a presentation with us, and that presentation is in the supervisor Dropbox folder. So I would really encourage you to look over that presentation. It was really informative, really helpful also in terms of understanding the difference between outputs and outcomes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that too, but I think that Autumn's presentation was really encompassing, and so I would encourage you to look back at that. So just as a brief touching on what Autumn had said before and quick overview, we really are focusing more on performance measures at the national level with the Corporation for National and Community Service this year. And so I think there's a really big focus on it this year in really understanding the impact of our project so that we can better tell the story of national service on both a collective level and an individual level. So Corporation for National and Community Service wants to be able to give those stories of impact nationally, regionally, by state, by community, and so they're really focusing on making sure that projects are assessing impact, understanding their goals in terms of their performance measures, and making sure that they're aligned. And Autumn talked a little bit about impact statements, and so I wanted to just give you an example of two. One being AmeriCorps Vista members raised more than $160 million in cash and in-kind resources in support of anti-poverty programs. And that is huge. Having an impact statement like that that gives very specific data is really great, not only on a national level to be able to share that impact that we're having and that great work that we're doing, but it's also good on a funding level and communicating with funders what our impact is. And so specifically for our Campus Compact, Maryland DC Campus Compact AmeriCorps Vistas, in the past 2 quarters, they've leveraged more than 1,300 volunteers and more than 12,000 hours of service. And so again, being able to have access to that information is just really useful, really impactful, really informative. You're able to give that information to your director or your president, and they can then have a kind of a statement, that statement to pull out and say, this is what our project is doing, this is the great work that we're accomplishing. We were recently at a CNCS AmeriCorps 50th anniversary, and there was a really great presentation by someone, and he communicated this, and it really stuck with me, was that data equals dollars. But it's not just about dollars, because dollars equal services to those who need it. So it's so important to be able to tell our story in both a quantitative way and a qualitative way, I think, so that we can have support for our programs. And if that's in the form of dollars, that can then be in the forms of the services and enhancing the services that we already offer. So I think there are a lot of importance to performance measures, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with the importance of assessment. So that's to give you some knowledge as far as at the national level what the idea is, what the gain is. So for those of you who are new and have a new project, you will be selecting performance measures and they will be your performance measures for the remainder of the grant. The first thing that I really advise you to do before you even select those performance measures is to sit down and really assess your project goals and outcomes. What change is going to happen that is going to move people out of poverty? AmeriCorps Vista is not just about making poverty more tolerable. It's really about lifting people out of poverty. Really those hand up services, not those hand out services. What is going to exist at the end of the grant that does not exist now? So thinking in terms of those questions I think is helpful. Reviewing the VAD and really involving the community partners in selecting these performance measures so that everybody's on the same page with what kind of data that you're expecting to be able to collect because you want to collect that in accurate ways. And so that might mean that you have some kind of survey or you have some kind of attendance log and that your community partner understands that and you're on the same page. So before you even sit down and select your performance measures as a new project, I really advise you to take these kind of preliminary steps, especially involving the community partner and the other stakeholders so that everybody's on board with this process and everybody's really excited about getting really great data, not just for Maryland DC Campus Compact, not just for CNCS, but also for you as a project and what that can do for you as a project. For those of you who are continuing projects, you already have performance measurements. And to give you a little bit of understanding, performance measurements kind of came up in the middle of last year, and so they were selected for our sites at that time. They're within your quarterly report and they align well with your project. However, I really encourage you to still review them and make some assessments. Your anti-poverty measures and your capacity building measures, we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we move on. But for those who are continuing, your anti-poverty performance measures should relatively remain the same because they kind of reflect the end goal of the project. So if the end goal of the project is access to care for those who are uninsured, then we wouldn't really expect that that performance measure would change because that's the goal of your project. You know, you're not kind of flipping like, oh, well, we want to do after school programs now. You have this goal of your project, and your anti-poverty measures kind of align with that. Your capacity building performance measures would possibly change because they reflect the kind of work that's being done each year. And what I mean by that is that there are some different examples of those, and I'll show you some of those later, but you might have number of volunteers recruited. Well, maybe you're doing that in the first year. You're really just recruiting them, you're getting them on board, or they're just starting, versus number of volunteers managed. That might be more of a second year measure. Or number of organizations that are participating in your program. Again, that might be more of a second year measure. So those might change, and that's completely fine. So for those who are continuing, please look at your quarterly report, review your performance measures, and make some of these assessments below. So you might need to make changes to anti-poverty measures if, after reviewing them, you find that you don't meet the required criteria, because each performance measure, there's kind of a advised way to collect that data. If you want to collect literacy scores and then you collect attendance, then that's not matching up, kind of apples and oranges. If another performance measure is more appropriate for the project, that might also be the case. Or if you are keeping your performance measure, but you need to change how you plan on measuring that performance measure, measuring that change in, that impact, that outcome. So I would like to take the opportunity to just kind of walk you through some of the resources in completing your performance measures. So at the end of the day, we will need the performance measures module that we've attached. And so I'm going to bring up that last because before you even complete that, I really want you to be able to look at some of the resources that are available to better understand performance measures. So the first one that we're going to look at is the National Service website. So when you're on the National Services website, these are all of the performance measures for AmeriCorps Vista, which is what your project would fall under now. There's AmeriCorps, there's NCCC. These are specific to Vista because, as we've said, Vista is about capacity building and anti-poverty. It's not direct service, it's that indirect service. So the performance measurements are going to be a little bit different. And each of these performance measurements come from the CNCS strategic plan, which if you want to find out more, there's a little fact sheet in your handbook that you can look at. So let's start just with measures. In the module, which we're going to look at later, you have two measures essentially that you need to select. One is a capacity building measure. How is the VISTA project adding value to the partners, to the organization, to the grantees? How is it leveraging valuable resources such as volunteers or cash resources or in-kind resources? The second performance measure is an anti-poverty measure. So, as you know, you had to select a focus area, being economic opportunity, education, healthy futures, or veterans. So you fall under one of those categories. And the anti-poverty measure is that component of bringing people out of poverty. That looks like a lot of different things, as I'm sure that we all know. You can tackle poverty and the issues of poverty in many different venues. And so these are the different venues with Vista that they're focused on. Now in others, like NCCC, they might have things like disaster services or elder care, different things, but for Vista, we focus on these four focus areas. So let's start first with capacity building. If you're here on the website, they have a kind of a key here to show you that green meaning a focus area, which is here with the anti-poverty, that economic, education, healthy futures, etc. The red hexagon is going to be objectives, meaning kind of like a sub-focus area. So if we click on economic opportunity, we get these objectives, which are financial literacy, housing, or employment. So that's what our objective is. Agency-wide priority measure is this little blue triangle, and that means just when you're clicking on these different things, you'll see certain things, see this as an orange dot, or you'll see this red. So or you'll see the blue, sorry. The blue being an agency-wide priority measure, being it's just one of their big focus areas. It's one of a priority area. And the orange being it's a complementary program measure. So they're kind of, as a corporation, they're more focused on these blue arrows, but the orange dots, those Vista complementary program measures, are equally performance measures. They're no different. So CNCS is kind of just distinguishing between which they're really focused on. So let's start with capacity building. So if you're clicking through, you'll see here that these are all of the outputs that are listed. So G3, 3.1, 3.2, 3.4, 3.5. If you're wondering where these numbers are coming from, G3 just stands for Goal 3. So one of the goals of Corporation for National and Community Service is capacity building. So it's Goal 3, Measure 3.1. If it's Goal 3, Measure 3.2, it's just different performance measurements. So that's what the G3 versus 3.1, 3.2, etc. all stand for. So these are all listed under outputs, And then underneath, if you're scrolling further down, you'll see the different outcomes. So Autumn had talked about before outputs versus outcomes. So outputs being more of the what's happening right now, kind of the counting beans, number of volunteers, number of hours, service hours, number of organizations that are getting capacity building services. And the outcome is kind of the so what behind that. So you have this many volunteers. What is your intended outcome for that? Or what is your goal for that output? So with capacity building, it's fairly simple. And when we look at the module, you'll see that they're not necessarily aligned. You can select as many outputs as you want, and you can select as many outcomes as you want. Later, when we get into the anti-poverty, you'll see that there's specific outcomes related to specific outputs. So, like I was saying earlier, if your output is number of children participating in a K through 12 education program, your outcome is probably not going to be number of people with healthcare, so they've got kind of aligned outcomes for some of these measures, which in a way makes it easier. And sometimes you have the option to create your own, or sometimes you have to create your own. CNCS doesn't necessarily have an aligned outcome, so you'll see that later. So this is capacity building. These are all of the outputs and outcomes. What I really like about this website is you can click on each one. So right now I'm just going to click on G3 3.2. And you'll find that they have the definition of key terms in this performance measure. So what does it mean to say community volunteers? What does it mean to say volunteers who are managed? And the really key part here is it tells you how to calculate, measure, or collect that data. So this is what I mean when we said earlier that you need to review your performance measures to see if you're collecting them accurately, because you should be collecting them in line with what CNCS would expect. Now, usually CNCS is not going to expect, if you're just collecting the number of volunteers managed, they're just kind of like, okay, well, you need to have an attendance sheet. So it's pretty straightforward. Just make sure that if you have a performance measure, that you fully understand how you're going to collect that data and that it aligns with what CNCS is expecting. And like I said, it's usually, it's what you would have done anyway. But the nice thing is that sometimes they give you really cool tools. So let's see if I can go back and select a different measure. They also will usually give you more information, links that give you more information. But as we go through, I'll show you possibly some tools where they have the how to collect data. They'll usually have a sample of an instrument or a sample of a form that you could actually use. So it's got a lot of information, really useful, really helpful if you are maybe new to collecting data or collecting assessments. So that's capacity building. That is the one category in which you'll select both an output and an outcome, and you'll see that on our module when we go through that. The second category that you are going to select performance measurements in are an anti-poverty measure. So let's, for example, say that we are a after-school program and we want to increase literacy rates. So my objective is education, and then if I go through here further, I can say, okay, well, I don't know, am I K through 12 success or am I school readiness? I don't know what I am. So go ahead and click through and read through the different performance measures to see what aligns with what your project's accomplishing. So let's see. If I'm looking at school readiness, I can see that this is an output, ED21, and underneath are all the aligned outcomes. So number of children that completed participation in CNCS supported early childhood education programs. And all that means, you'll see that language a lot, CNCS supported. It's because the VISTA grant is technically a CNCS, it's a subgrantee. You are a subgrantee, so you have CNCS supported services. So that's what that means if you're seeing that and you're wondering what that means. So if I'm looking at the aligned outcomes, I can see that the number of children demonstrating gains in school readiness in terms of literacy skills. So that's what we were talking about. So I'm going to click on that measure. And again, it gives me definition of key terms, and it gives me how to calculate and measure data. Here's an example, really awesome example of actually giving a sample instrument for literacy. So I'm going to click on that just to give you guys an idea. And so it talks a little bit about, if you're developing an instrument, how you should go about that. And then the two sample instruments that they have in this packet are, one is from Head Start and one is from the Maryland Head Start Child Development Outcomes Framework. So if you're finding sample instruments through the CNCS website, that means that you are free to utilize them. You can use what you are already using, or you can utilize these tools. They are free to use to the public. So this is really great, gives very clear literacy assessment. And so again, please take time to explore the website, because if you don't already have a tool that you utilize, you can really use the resources that they have. So I have my after school program. I'm measuring literacy skills. I know what my output is, and I now know what my outcome is and how to measure that outcome. It also gives another sample readiness tool from Senior Corps. So usually these tools are from other AmeriCorps programs, which is really great. Just to give you another example, let's say we are an economic opportunity and we are a financial literacy program, and we want to, let's say that your goal for your project is that you want to increase the number of people who open bank accounts or who report a certain amount of savings or whatever it is. So I'm going to go to financial literacy, and there's only two measures here. So if I'm reading it, number of economically disadvantaged individuals receiving financial literacy services. Okay, that applies to me. That can be my output. Outcome is number of economically disadvantaged individuals with improved financial knowledge. Well, maybe I want to measure something different. Yes, improved financial knowledge is part of it, but maybe I have a more specific measure, like the number of people opening bank accounts, that I want to measure. That is completely fine, and you'll put that in your performance measures when you're completing the document. So just as an example, again, I'm going to click here. And sometimes they don't have as much information. You'll find that some performance measures have these long pages and others don't. But again, this gives another sample instrument. So if I'm going through here, it kind of gives all the background on the instrument and how you can measure this outcome. So that is the AmeriCorps Vista Performance Measures website. I would really encourage, before you even sit down with the document, to just go through here and figure out what you want through here. So if you're going and you're clicking through, just write down, okay, I'm education, okay, I'm post-secondary education, and I really like performance measures ED9 or ED2 or whatever it is for you. So this is really, really helpful. Another resource that's really helpful is on the Vista campus. And the Vista campus is more of a public forum where people post resources and different forms. So I would also really encourage you to just, for your own knowledge, become familiar with the Vista campus, make a profile. All of the Vista members will have a Vista campus profile because they have to, in order to do their online, they do an online pre-service orientation before they do their in-person orientation at Philadelphia. So this link was one that Autumn shared with us, and it's just kind of a curriculum model for performance measurements. So I'm in the Vista campus now. I'm going to show you a little bit of it in a second, but for this specific link, I can click on core curriculum. The Vista Impact app is something that's new. They're trying to get more people to use it. It's basically like a little app where your project can kind of keep track of hours served, number of volunteers. So if you're interested in that, take a look. But this is what I want to show you. Really great, really comprehensive. And it goes, actually, it directs you back to the National Service website. And it takes you through different tutorials, different articles, theory of change you might be familiar with, making evidence-based models, quality performance measures. How do you ensure that you are collecting quality data? How do you collect your data? How do you design the instruments? All of those things. And like I said, many of you may already have this, and so don't reinvent the wheel. Don't feel like you need to kind of completely do things over. You know, oh, we need to create a whole measurement tool. You probably already have a tool out there that you can utilize, and if you don't, there's tools out there that you can research and find, or really your Vista member can research and find and utilize. So that, I think, is one great thing to have them do when they get on board, as they understand the Vista assignment description and the project goals. Have them sit down and go through the performance measures, the Vista performance measures website, and really understand this. And once you, by that time, you'll have already selected your measures. Have them participate in finding a sample instrument, because even if your plan is to collect literacy scores, we don't expect that you're going to give us the tool right now. You know, you might be in development of that tool throughout the year. So just know that when you select the measure, we understand that you're probably going to be in development of it. The other thing being that you probably won't have data until the end of the year. You might do a mid-year evaluation, but we would expect that for your measure of number of students showing increased literacy, it's going to be 0 until the end of the year, because you're not going to know until you assess them. So again, this is just really great resource. I'd familiarize yourself with it. I'd have your Vista members familiarize themselves with it. To give you kind of a, give you kind of an ad for these different great websites. The National Service is the governmental website where you can find more about the Corporation for National and Community Service, and they have all of these resources available. So this is kind of the official, very official information that you can get access to, resources that CNCS has put out, webinars that they've put out, articles, guidance, things like that. And the Vista Campus, which is how we found this, is, like I said, it's a public forum. So it's kind of more an informal opportunity to learn. A lot of these materials are from CNCS, but there's also some others that are kind of posted publicly by other alums or Vista members or supervisors. So it's got a Life as a Vista tab that will be really helpful for your Vista member, and they'll be familiar with this when they come on board, and we'll talk to them about it too. The work, fundraising, communication, marketing, different program areas. Connect and Learn is where you can find forums and webinars. I'll take you there for just a second as a little sidebar to our performance measures here. But they have webinars available for Vista supervisors and for Vista leaders. So really encourage you all to also utilize this. They've got some really great webinars about strengthening VADs, how do you successfully recruit a Vista member. So, please feel free to utilize those. They also have specifically a supervisors tab. So, becoming a supervisor, member policies, coaching and supporting, e-grants, reporting, all of these things are really great. And like I said, sometimes you'll find that it just kind of directs you back to the CNCS website, but it's really helpful because there's a lot of material on the CNCS website, and so for somebody else to have already done the work for you is helpful. So you can actually just search here, like if I'm looking for performance measurement information, I'll just search. And I can even click on the type. So if over here to your left, if I'm a supervisor or I have a particular focus area, if I'm looking for a resource or maybe just a general page, really, really great. I love the Vista Campus. And if you have questions about it, please let me know. So those are just two really great resources I just wanted to share with you, because you can find a lot of information about performance measures on those websites. So now I want to go over the actual document where you'll put in your selected performance measurements. And to give you kind of the background of why it's structured like this, when we as Maryland DC Campus Compact put in our master grant for all of you, we say, here are all of our sites and these are their projects that they've submitted, and we get all that information through your applications. They will, in the eGrant system and in this master grant system, they'll ask us for every performance measure for every site. And so, like I said, last year we made that selection based on the understanding of our project, of your projects, and our understanding and working together and knowing, your goals for your project and knowing the performance measures where they're most likely to align. And so this year we really want to make sure that you are selecting your performance measures and that you have the ability to inform that process. So it's pretty straightforward, but I just want to kind of go through it quickly. Basic information on the first page. This just gives you a little bit about information that you might find useful. These are the things that you'll be doing in this performance measurements module. And I call it a module because it does kind of go through different steps. It's kind of modeled after how we will see it in eGrants. Like when we go into eGrants, it will ask us these specific questions. So it's kind of modeled after what you would theoretically see in an eGrants system. Key definitions. I kind of have definitions in the document throughout. So if you're wondering, if you're seeing something and you're like, what is an objective again? Or what is an output and how is that different from an outcome, or capacity building versus anti-poverty? Usually I have the definitions in that section, but you can also go to the first page if you're looking for them. So each thing is divided up into sections. So section 1 is capacity goal. So for this project overall, in what way, what kind of activities will the project be doing? Are they increasing the reach of your organization, the ability to serve more people? Or is it leveraging resources where it's leveraging volunteers and partnerships? So you select one primary goal. You can have more than one, but know that if you have more than one, you have to do a different performance measure document for each capacity goal. So figure out which one your project falls under the most. If you had to pick one, what is this project really going to encompass? Most of the time, I would say that our projects would be scale and reach, or leverage resources, but make the assessment for your project and your goals and your outcomes. So this form is clickable, so you can actually I'm going to just do it right now as an example. You can actually click, well, it won't do it for me because I have it pulled up as a download, but you'll actually be able to click in the document itself. So this little checkbox, you should be able to just click right inside of it. If you do have any technical difficulties, just have another way to mark it. You could, for example, just kind of highlight the whole thing. And we'll know. But it should be clickable where you'll actually click this and then it'll have an X. But because I downloaded this from another computer, it's not giving me that ability right now. Section 2 is service activities. So asking what will the project what kinds of activities will the project be doing? And so I have a really brief definition here for each of these things. If you're looking for more information, like if the definition isn't enough for you and you're wondering like, well, I don't necessarily know if we're focusing on program development and delivery. What does that look like? Or what does technology use look like? If you go to the very end, we actually have an appendix. So I'll show that to you now. If you go to the very end, the appendix actually has all of these service activities, and it's really helpful because it has examples of the different Vista activities. So technology use was one that I was a little bit like, what does that exactly mean? So an example of that might be that they are developing social media tools or doing database work. And so you might find that you're thinking, well, my Vista member and this Vista project is going to focus on all of those things. I would focus on the ones that are critical to the success of the project. So if the success of the project and if moving the project forward means that you're doing heavy volunteer recruitment, then that should be a piece of a service activity that you have. So that's found in the appendix. Really helpful, really awesome. I think it also is helpful when you're also describing this, because you'll have to kind of give a really quick, short description. And so you might say, well, the MDCC AmeriCorps Vista member will design a community assessment plan for the X neighborhood to collect XYZ. So I'm going to go back up. So once you've selected those different service activities, you'll also just do a really brief description. So I want to say that here, for example, I want to say the MDCC AmeriCorps Vista member will recruit X number of college or community. The more specific is always better, but this does not need to be long. So number of, let's say Starbucks University for the Tea for All. I know you guys just love the things I'm making up right now. Tea for All after school program through an attendance log, or whatever it may be. So just really briefly give a little description of what that service activity will look like. So that is section 2. So now we're getting into the actual performance measurements, okay? So now we're getting into those two categories, the capacity building and the anti-poverty. So the capacity building, as we said before, it's really about, and again, you can go to the first page to refresh yourself if you're needing the definition of capacity building and what that means in terms of CNCS, you know, because it's kind of, that can mean a lot of different things. But it's, how is the project increasing value for those that it serves? So the first is that you'll select an output. You only need to select one output. You can certainly select more than one output. If you are collecting more than one thing, then we definitely want to know about it. You know, data is really valuable, and it is really helpful for us to be able to tell that story to other people, not just the state office, but when we go and we make additional partnerships, or we meet new people, or we're at conferences. For example, the University of Baltimore creating Unlimited Possibilities, the Cups Coffee House project, was actually featured at the AmeriCorps Vista 50th anniversary. And that was, the state office was able to make that happen, and we were able to make that happen because we're able to inform them of the great work that they're doing. And part of that is because we understand the data, we understand what is the day-to-day, what's happening, and also what have been the outcomes of all that great work. So it's really valuable to have these, and to, you know, if you have more than one, that's great. So important things to know about this as you go through this. The bold kind of 1 and 2 are going to be your instructions, and I've just put in like tips every now and then if you need a little reminder. But this is where you'll actually select your different measures. So if you need more information, if you see that it's blue, it's hyper and underlined, it's hyperlinked. So I've actually hyperlinked every single performance measure to the performance measure on the National Service website that I was showing you earlier. So if I want more information, if I'm thinking, I think I want to measure number of organizations that received capacity building services, but I want to make sure that A, I understand the definition of what that means, and B, that I will in fact be collecting the data in accordance with what CNCS would expect. So all you do is you can click, or usually you might have to like control clicked. For me, I just have the ability to click into the document, or Command Alt, things like that. And so it might take a minute. And so now it's brought me to the web page. So that way you guys don't have to kind of sort through. It's already all in this module, and you can just click as you go through the module if you need more information. So you'll select an output, and you'll see that with every measure it has this kind of underneath it, these three different things. Select method, instrument description, and target number. So instrument description will be that you will need to enter a description of the measurement that you're going to use. So if you're doing number of community volunteers recruited by organizations or participants, then you would be, you would probably collect that through an attendance log or an activity log or whatever it may be. And then with enter description here, you'll actually say, again, MDCC, or at least this is how we write it in our master grant. We might say MDCC AmeriCorps Vista member will collect attendance logs after each daily session or weekly, or whatever it is. What are they going to do? How are they collecting this data? And then your target number will be again, pretty self-explanatory, but the target number for that performance measure. So number of community volunteers recruited by organizations or participants. Let's say I want to make a goal of 30. And one important thing to remember is this is a target number. And, sometimes we have Vista members that say, I'm not at my target number. And I say, well, we're only in like month 3. Again, like some of these measures might only come up later on, or you might have recruitment comes really heavy during 1 month. So don't be discouraged by 0. You should be getting to that target number over the course of the year, but understand that again, it's a target number. It's a goal. It's a plan. And kind of a roadmap. We like to say that the Vista assignment descriptions, the VADs, are roadmaps. So again, think of this as your roadmap. You're going to be expected to report on these things and make it, I think Autumn talked about this a little bit, make it reasonable. Maybe 200 community volunteers is not necessarily reasonable for this current year. Maybe it's just 50, or number of students that are going to be in the program might be 15. So make it you're able to accomplish it, and that it's reasonable for you. You're also going to select an outcome, so like we talked about output versus outcome. And if you want a little bit more of a refresher on that, Autumn's PowerPoint is really good with giving some different examples of those. So again, same thing. Each thing is linked to the actual website, and you can go and find out more information. And that kind of concludes your capacity building outputs and outcomes, and then you move into your anti-poverty measures. So this has more it's taking me to a measure because I clicked on it. This has a little bit more instructions because you first have to find your focus area, and then you got to find your objective, and it looks like a lot, but once you already know these things. You know your economic opportunity and your financial literacy, or your education and your K through 12 success. So once you just go to that area, you're like, oh, here we go, here I am. And some might have more measures and some might not. So I'm going to keep going with this education, financial literacy, and the other example are economic opportunities. So I'm going to go, okay, I'm education. Is my objective K through 12 success? If it is, here are the performance measures and the aligned outcomes. So this is your output. And then underneath, it kind of appears just like on the website. Here are all of your aligned outcomes underneath. So if you're selecting this one, and then I want to select, again, the literacy here, and and then again, here's another output with its aligned outcome. So I'm going to do a couple different examples. So if that's what you are, then you're kind of done from this point. You've selected that you're education, you've selected that you're K through 12 success. If there are additional measures that you want to put into this document, you are free to put those in as other. But officially, you only need one within each category. You only need two technically. You need one category of capacity building, an output, and an outcome, and then your category of anti-poverty, an output, and an outcome. So I'm going to keep going through here. Here is the priority measure education with post-secondary education support. So some of those outcomes would be, these are the outcomes for ED2. Number of students entering post-secondary institutions or earning a post-secondary degree. And then again, here's a performance measure. So this one only has, I see, this one has 3. So this objective has 3 performance measures and then multiple outcomes underneath that you could potentially select. So again, you can select more than one of these too. This is the education with the school readiness. I'm going to go back to our example from earlier of financial literacy services. So here I'm economic opportunity. Let's say I'm not necessarily employment. Again, let's say I'm financial literacy. So these are the 2 that I would be selecting and putting information in for. If there's an other, you could simply put in other and type in, outcome, put that in, method, etc. But by the time that you'll see this, I will probably go ahead and also add that to this document so that those of you who are adding additional measures, you'll already have this kind of template where you just go and it says other so that you won't have to type anything in. Priority measure economic opportunity with the specific objective of housing. So it's kind of like a replica of the website, and that's why I kind of say to just go to that first and pick from there. And then this process is much easier where you're just simply like, okay, I'm Healthy Futures, we're obesity and food, and these are our measures and these are what we're looking at. Some of them don't have aligned outcomes. So Healthy Futures with access to care, these are all of the possible performance measures. The aligned outcomes, they actually don't have a specific aligned outcome, so you'll have to make your own for that. Same thing for veterans. They don't have a specific aligned outcome at this time, so you'll have to, based on your output, you'll have to make your outcome. And when you're done completing it, you will just save it either as a doc file or a PDF file and submit it to our office. So as we said, we are hoping that you'll have these completed before April 3rd. And you're welcome to send them to, please send them to Madeline, Yin, and myself. If you have questions about your specific measures or this document or any of this regarding performance measurements, please feel free to call us or email. I'm happy to set up a call. That's why we're here. We're here to help through this process with this grant. And so there are things that CNCS needs, and there's things that Maryland DC Campus Compact needs, and there are things that we both need. And so we're just trying to help in that process to make sure that at the end of the day, you can focus your energy and your time on the success of your project. When you officially go to report on these performance measurements, they come through a quarterly report. And you're also given the opportunity to include narratives, because I'm a big believer that sometimes the stories of impact that we have are not always just related through numbers. And I'm sure that many of you understand that as well. At the same time, we all know how important numbers are. So I really like that we also have that opportunity to have narratives, and we actually have a section where we ask for stories. You know, what kind of stories of impact do you have? And I honestly enjoy reading those the most when I'm reading our monthly and our quarterly reports. So I hope that this has been helpful for you all. We really hope that you really take advantage of all of these really awesome, really awesome. I just really love the Vista Campus. I'm a huge fan, and the National Service Network website, because they can really help simplify a lot of these things. So I hope that you take advantage of these resources. If you need more assistance or you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will be happy to schedule a call or go over your questions as we move through this process. So thank you for joining, and we look forward to receiving your performance measures before April 3rd, and let us know if you have any questions. Thanks, guys. Bye.